I think if you go to most average loan originators and ask them who the realtors are that they work with, and then you kind of dig down into so why is that? Tell me about that relationship. Yeah. More often than not, it's because there's a connection there. I would hang with that person.
You are listening to the Loan Officer Strategy Session podcast, where top producers answer your mortgage origination questions. To get your questions answered, check out our Facebook group, Loan Officer Strategy Sessions, or submit direct to the website for upcoming episodes at lostrategysessions.com. Now, here's your host, Andrew Sauce.
Okay, welcome to the Loan Officer Strategy Session podcast. This is Andrew Sauce, your host. Couple quick housekeeping items. I just want to say the reception to the show, the first few episodes have been really great. Thanks so much for all of the people who have reached out to say that the episodes have been impactful on them. I appreciate all the kind words, emails, etc. Please continue to send that. That really does make my job a lot easier of producing these podcasts when I know that people are A, listening, and B, taking some value out of them. If you want to return the favor, it would be really helpful for me if you take a quick few minutes and review us on Apple Podcast or Stitcher or Google Play or wherever you found the show. That would be really helpful for us to have other people be able to find it as well. You can also share the podcast with any other loan officers you think it would be helpful to. But thanks again for the support. Okay, on to this week's show. This week I had the pleasure of speaking with the one and only Bill Hart. Bill is an author, business coach. He specializes in coaching loan officers and real estate agents and has done so for coming up on 20 years now. I don't personally coach with Bill. However, I'm connected to a few people who do, and they've, without fail, have all said really great things about his approach. And so I thought it would be enlightening for us to have him come speak to our audience, to you, and see what we can glean from his amazing knowledge. In this episode, we touched on, technology, potential impact on technology disruption in our business. Talked about his new book titled White Collar Warrior, which sounds very interesting. And by the time you're hearing this, it will have just come out. So it's brand new, available. Go check that out. I'm going to be reading it very quickly here. And then we also talk about the 6 things that all top real estate agents and mortgage salespeople all have in common. So that was a nice little framework for the discussion. I thought it was really great. I found him highly engaging, and I thought this was just a really wonderful conversation. Just one quick note, I do have to apologize for the slight audio quality degradation on this episode. You'll hear that when Bill is speaking, there's a slight echo, totally on my end. He sounded great when we were recording it, but I had one of the settings wrong on my equipment. So hopefully it's not too distracting, but my apologies in advance. I have found that after a few minutes, you do get used to it. So my apologies to Bill on the audio quality, but hopefully it'll still be okay. So without further delay, please welcome to the show, Coach Bill Hart. All right, welcome to Loan Officer Strategy Sessions. I am Andrew Sauce. I am here today with the one and only Bill Hart, Coach Bill Hart. Bill, how you doing?
I'm so good, man. I'm looking forward to hanging with the hot sauce.
Right? Thank you.
My pleasure.
If you can come up with a new play on my last name, I'd be impressed. I think I've heard every single one.
I'll bet you have, man. Yeah, no, sorry. That's just the first one that occurred to me. And by the way, feel free to not do the same thing with me.
Right, yeah.
We can just move past that.
I'm sure you've had your fair share, right? Given your last name. Yeah, so Bill, thanks so much for joining us. I've been wanting to chat with you for a long time. I've sort of briefly known you mainly just on Facebook, to the extent that you can know somebody on Facebook, and followed your posts. And I do know that a couple of people who coach with you and have all said really good things. So why don't you just share with us really quick, how did you make your way into the mortgage industry? I know you coach, you're not an originator right now, correct?
Correct.
So you coach mainly originators. Do you coach anybody outside of the mortgage industry as well?
I do. I coach a few top realtors, very high end, not high end in terms of average sales price, but lots of volume, large teams. And I coach a woman with Rodan and Fields, the skincare company, the direct marketing skincare company, which is about as random as it gets. But yeah, it's just my daughter's involved in the company, and this is her best friend and her upline. And so, I'm coaching her, and it's fascinating learning more about that business. But yeah, man, 5% of my clients are in the mortgage space, and I've been doing this for 15 years.
Wow.
I think we calculated the other day that's 12,000 hours in the coaching chair. And it's a lot. I was with Building Champions in '07 when the market tanked.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting time. Were you in the business then?
I was. Yeah. I just started a brokerage in December of '06, so my timing is unbelievable.
Spectacular. Yeah, exactly. Well, and you can imagine for a coaching company that then was almost entirely in the mortgage space, we had people saying, dude, I got to, turn back in my BMW lease and I'm canceling my gym membership. And man, I can't continue coaching. Yeah. So in '08, to supplement my income and stay involved in coaching, I was doing voiceovers.
Really?
I live in Southern California, right? So it's not all that hard if you've got a decent voice to get a gig doing that. That's what I was doing to supplement my income. But so that was
that's interesting.
That was when the market turned. Building Champions then got involved with Chick-fil-A, who is now our second largest client, and our number one client is Daimler Trucks North America, which is a Daimler company, obviously the Chrysler, Mercedes, German conglomerate. Yep. And only about a third of our volume now is in the mortgage space, but I say all of that to say that I'm essentially all in on the mortgage side and have been for 15 years.
Interesting. I didn't realize Building Champions had stuff outside of the mortgage space. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Quite a bit. Most of our business, actually.
That's really interesting. And you're in Southern California. You in LA area?
Ventura County.
Ventura County?
LA and Santa Barbara.
Yep. Up in Tim Brahim area.
Exactly right. Tim and I used to work together years ago, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
Got it. Awesome. And so did you originate previous to coaching, or did you come to it from something else?
I did. My background was I really started my sales career selling airplanes for Beechcraft West at the Van Nuys Airport in the 80s. So I was selling airplanes to people who didn't need them, but using a pretty great tax strategy to get them to lease them back to a flight club. And that's where I learned everything that I learned about selling, really. And from there, moved into real estate and became the director of recruiting for Century 21 Real Estate in Southern California. Did that for about 8 years. Moved to, I had hired Mike Ferry, Tom Ferry's dad, for our younger listeners. I had hired Mike Ferry a number of times as a speaker for our sales rallies. And Mike and I had sort of hit it off. And so he hired me in 1990 to be his general manager, vice president, general manager, and come down and run Mike Ferry Productions, which was actually a really bad idea for both of us. It was not a good fit. It was not nothing about it was good. And it only lasted a year. But in that time, I met Todd Duncan, who at that time was a young guy with dark hair. And Todd and I connected and had a similar worldview. And, he was full of vim and vinegar and kind of coming out of a partnership, which was then the Pratt Duncan Group, a partnership he had with Jim Pratt. And so what we decided was that it would be a good idea for me then to join Todd and begin speaking to mortgage audiences. And Todd had the brilliant idea of saying, if you were to interview top producing realtors every month, we could sell the interviews. We'll call it the real estate performance system. And it will give you the content to go speak to real estate audiences because you've been interviewing these top producing realtors. Well, fast forward today, I've been doing that now for 20 years, interviewing a top producing realtor every month for 20 years. And I now realize I'm the last guy standing, like nobody else has done this for that length of time. And it's really kind of, Andrew, what's differentiated me in the mortgage space is I understand that other side of the equation so well. So that's what got me to Duncan. And then through Duncan, Daniel Harkavy, the founder of Building Champions, was coaching Todd. And Daniel was setting up a 6-foot table at Sales Mastery out in the hallway and putting a banner over it that said Building Champions.
Yeah.
He said, you'd be a great coach. And I said, I appreciate that. Where are you located? And he said, Portland. And I said, love you, dude. Not moving.
See you later.
And a couple of years later, back then it was called telecommuting. And we landed on the fact that I didn't actually have to live there. And so I joined Building Champions in January 2003. And it has been 15 amazing years, and I'm blessed to be there.
That's great. What a story. Yeah. So I've got a lot of questions.
You bet.
in the interviewing top producing realtors for 20 years, Tony Robbins says that success leaves clues, right? So if you're doing something long enough, you have to,
for sure,
you'd be kind of dumb to not be able to pick up something, right? So there has to be some commonalities. So these top producing realtors, what are the commonalities that you see between top producing realtors and top producing mortgage people, mortgage originators that you try to pass on to your coaching clients?
I would say that number one is clarity, as opposed to goal diffusion, which is very common. In other words, top realtors in particular, they're such an easy one to call out. We have to make a little bit of a stretch or a little bit of a bridge into the mortgage space. But top producing realtors, by and large, there's exceptions to everything, but by and large, they've selected a specific market, a specific niche, a specific type of property, a specific area, zip code, whatever, and they dominate it. Now, in some cases, of course, as they grow, I'm coaching a guy right now that does, 200 units a year. He's a realtor, and he's got 7 companies, and, he's got all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah.
But it started with him being very specific in his focus. So that's really number one, I think, is that they get really clear. I like to describe it as a narrow lane. The best way for me to describe that, Andrew, is you think about realtors that you've known, and everybody knows an agent like this, and I call them dabblers. Right? They're real estate agents that dabble. So they show up for the sales meeting. They show up for caravan. If they stub their toe on a transaction, they do it. They're reactive, right? They're on their heels, not on the balls of their feet. And so what ends up happening is it's like, oh yeah, ranch style, I can do that. Downtown condo, sure, I'll figure it out. A lease, I'm not sure. I'll co-op it. I'll figure it out.
Commercial.
That's not what, exactly. But that's not what top people do. Top people refer that stuff out. And so they'll focus very specifically on the one area that they want to focus on.
Yeah. So it's less about what they're doing and more about what they're not doing. Right.
Yeah. 100%.
I mean, and being what I found, like in being kind of a junkie, seminar junkie is kind of my self-proclaimed title. Like I kind of like a lot of this stuff. I like listening to seminars. I like getting new ideas. What I found the hardest part about that is implementation. And the hardest part about implementation is, as somebody who sees the positive in a lot of different strategies and realizes that a lot of different strategies can be implemented successfully, being okay with either backburnering or completely passing on some strategy that will make you money in exchange for the clarity of doubling down or tripling down on what is your lane, what is your strength. And this is this is not just an originator thing. This is, full mortgage companies have to be really aligned with what their core strengths are. And I think the companies that try to be everything end up not doing anything very well. And so having that confidence of like, hey, this is what we're good at and this is where we're not good. And trying to align with originators who understand that.
Yeah, man. Totally. There's an old saying, I don't know who to attribute it to, but it's you have to say no to the good so that you can say yes to the great.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because it's easy to say no to somebody who wants you to help them. Let's say as an originator, somebody wants you to do a standalone $25,000 equity line off the street. Right. It's easy to refer that out, right? But maybe a little bit harder to refer out that $2 million commercial deal that you're seeing at the end of the table is
no, you're right.
Potential commission, but it's not your expertise.
Right. That's what drives them. But what it does is it takes them into a zone, as you say, that is not their expertise. And they end up getting very narrow over a wide area instead of going deep in one or two. So I mean, to answer your question on the realtor side, and it applies to lenders as well, but there's really 6 things that I see. So I've listed one as get clear, right? Number 2, time and time again, man, they time block. They call it different things, but they time block. So whether it's hour of power or dialing for dollars or on time, in time, whatever it is, it's time blocking. They control their time very specifically. Number 3, they get in front of the business of generating leads. Right? Top realtors own the idea of I am in the lead generation business. So whether that's knocking on doors and handing out refrigerator magnets and pumpkins or using Zillow or Boomtown or whatever, right? Whatever it is that they do to generate leads, they control that. Number 4 is an interesting one that I don't see a lot of people talking about, but I see it over and over again. They crave efficiencies. They they crave efficiency. So in other words, top agents will tell me, well, yeah, I have a system for that. I have a system for that. So, in real estate, they've got two sides of the house, right? They've got the listing side and they've got the sales side. And so if a buyer lead comes in, there's a system. It's input into a system. Often than not these days, of course, it's a CRM that drives all of the actions. Same thing on the listing side. The same thing on presenting offers. They've got systems. So they're always craving efficiency.
Yeah.
Number 5 is something, again, I don't hear people talking about, but I see it over and over and over again, and it's they radiate confidence. They just do, man. They radiate confidence. And you can take that too far. You know? You can be obnoxious, and we all know realtors like that.
Yeah.
But the strong ones figure out how to keep that in check.
Yeah, that's a really interesting fine line, because it comes from the TV shows most likely, right? The super ultra confident, borderline annoying, super successful. I mean, to the extent, reality TV is scripted, but seemingly successful. And, that's a certain personality type that can pull that off. And who knows if they are pulling it off or not in real life. But there is also, you don't see very many timid realtors who are successful.
Absolutely. Right. But let me give you a great example of this. I coach a guy that's, I think he's about 30 years old now. His name is Templeton Walker in Phoenix, Arizona. And I would encourage everybody who's listening to this to go friend him on Facebook. Like, no kidding. You need to track with Templeton Walker. He's about 30 years old. He came from very humble beginnings, lived in the Grand Canyon. Didn't even know that was possible, but totally did. And he got into real estate, and he started a traditional real estate firm. And then he realized pretty quickly that, there's an opportunity here for what he refers to as wholesale. So meaning that you and your wife, your in-laws pass, or Aunt Judy passes away, and she hadn't done anything to the home for 40 years. And you're like, we can either put 30 grand into it to get 225, or Templeton will give me, 150 now, cash on the barrelhead. We have it tomorrow. So he'll do that. He does a lot of those now, and he does it in a way where when he sits down with the prospective seller, he just lays out the options. Like, look, we can just list it, and I'll have a person come in and they'll help you sort of set up the property so that it shows well, right? Stage it. Or if you want to just do this, we can do that too. And then he does sort of this arbitrage where he assigns the contract to a person that's going to flip it. But he gets in the middle of it, and he'll make his, 25 to 50 grand, and he moves on to the next one. But the reason I bring him up is he has such an awesome attitude where he comes across, it's the beautiful combination, Andrew, of humility and confidence, where he's gracious, but there's no doubt in your mind that this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. And if I go down the path with him, I'm going to have a great desired outcome. And isn't that true with any of us in any sales endeavor? Isn't that what we would hope to be?
I think when we're on, I think all of us think we're good at what we do. It's a matter of everybody has sat across from clients where you just are clicking and you're feeling like every question that they ask, I'm going to have the right answer for. I know exactly which direction this conversation is going. You're coming off as super confident, and they're experiencing you as the expert. To the extent that you could do that more and more often, and it becomes more natural, I think that's kind of where sales experience comes in. That certainly takes a lot of repetition and a lot of experience. And I think some people are more natural at it than others. But
I think that's really the key. I do think people are more natural, but some are more natural at it than others. And the one thing I would coach people to think about is, like, I just had somebody hit me up with a question on this last night on Instagram, and the question was, it was actually a lender asking on behalf of a realtor, I have a client who has call reluctance. What should I tell them? And I said, well, I need to know more about what kind of call reluctance, like what are we talking about? The situation he knows he needs to be calling his past clients, but he's uncomfortable with it. And I said, well, that can only come from the fact that he's putting his own needs in front of theirs. So if you reverse that, right, if you say, well, hang on, I'm going to serve these people. In that process, I get paid. I'm not approaching it with a commission in mind, right? And I guarantee you that's Templeton's mindset. So I would just say, what I try and coach people to consider, Andrew, is if you change the way that you view people and you just go in with a sense of, I'm here to serve, and if I provide enough value, they're going to move forward, and then I get paid. But if I drive with the commission, people read that all day long.
Totally. To touch really quick on that too is, I think that some people are going to naturally have a wider swath of people that they're able to that have that confidence radiance happen. But everyone has somebody, some type of person, some type of transaction, some type of referral partner who they just are going to align with better. And you're just, some people like myself, I feel like I'm a good salesperson and I can talk to anybody, but there's some people that just, for whatever reason, I just not comfortable with that type of personality. I can't even put my finger on what it is, but I just know it when I see it. And so backing into knowing that there's enough people out there who will do business with you in the way that you want to do business and will refer people to you in the way that you want them referred, getting in front of that pipeline of people will allow you to be more confident and have better conversations across the board more often.
I think that's a really good point. And I hope listeners got what you just said, because I think it's a subtlety that happens with experience more often than not. So if you can learn it earlier, I think it's a bonus. And I don't know if that's a sixth sense, a spidey sense, intuition, if it's behavioral assessment matching, like DISC or Myers-Briggs. But what I do know is if you trust your gut on that stuff, like, you know what, this guy is really going to be a pain. If you feel that up front, here's what I know for sure. It's never going to get any better.
It never gets better. It's rare. I had a coach for the last couple of years who had this concept called a listening. So like everybody has a listening for somebody else. The way he described it was a listening is the feeling that you get when you see somebody pop up on your caller ID. What's your first gut reaction? If your first gut reaction is, oh, it's my buddy Dave. Like, Dave, what's up? Or is your first reaction, ugh, it's Joe the realtor. And then you sit there for a second like, do I pick it up? Do I not pick it up? Exactly. All right. Hey, Joe. Like, and everybody, you have a certain listening. You can influence your listening for other people if you're aware of kind of like how you're coming off. And, my goal is always to have it where when my caller ID pops up on their phone, that I've done such a good job that they've got a really good listening for me. Totally. But being aware of that is an interesting concept, I think, sometimes.
It's a great way to frame it. Kudos to your coach. That's brilliant.
So what's number 6?
Number 6 is track. They all track. And it's it's a subtle thing that so many of them, what I love is they do it old school. So, there's so many easy ways to track these days with our CRMs, right? But a lot of them, because if you think about it in real estate, it's just like in mortgage, their business starts over every month.
Yeah.
Right? They have a month end just like we have a month end. And in most real estate sales offices, if you've been in one and seen it, I'm sure you have. Most of them have a big whiteboard, right? And the whiteboard, they draw all that stuff up there. It's just the way it works. It has for 50 years. But they track. And so like another guy that I used to coach, Brett Tanner, this is an image I use in my talks all the time. He had on the back of his office door, relatively humble office, but when he closed the door to his office, he had butcher paper going vertically up his door. And he had 2 thermometers. One was for the number of sales he wanted for the year, and the other was the number of listings. And it was 300 and 200. Wow. So he did a lot of volume, right? Yeah. So what his assistant would do is she would come in and make a mark every week on the thermometers. So when he had a team meeting, they would always come in and they would look at the thermometers. And if you're familiar with the 4 Disciplines of Execution, a fantastic book by Chris McChesney, he talks about the fact that you've got to have some kind of visual representation of your goals. As a coach, I'm telling you, man, it's just like it's inarguable truth that if it's visible, the distractions will still take you off track, right? But then you're going to look up and like, oh, right, that's where I'm headed. I've got to have that. And today I haven't had any leads. I've got to stop what I'm doing and I've got to get on the phone. Yeah. So they track. They can tell you where their dollars are being spent, what their ROI is on their advertising and their marketing efforts. They know what their conversion rates are. And here's the thing. So I'm talking to mortgage people right now primarily. I really want you to think about this. Ask your realtors as you work with them. So when you're out on a listing presentation, how do you talk about your numbers being different than the board averages in your favor? And the vast majority of top agents are going to say, because their numbers are better, right? Like the board average is, 40 days on market, we're 30. The board average is, 90% list to sell, we're 98. Yeah. Right? So those are the kind of things that take listing presentations over the top. And it's a subtlety that most mortgage lenders don't see because you're not there at the listing presentation, right? You wouldn't know that. Yeah. And so what I'm trying to do is kind of give you a peek behind the curtain. Like for them, that's money. And if there's a weakness there, come alongside them and coach them on putting that data together on a phone or an iPad so that they can make that presentation. Because right now in the low inventory environment, as we know, they want more listings. They don't need more lenders saying, hey, do you have a buyer?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. So let's talk a bit about that goal piece of it. So like when I see, you said 300 and 200, so that's 500 sales, 500 sides a year. What would you say, like somebody who's got big goals in the beginning of the year, and let's say they're tracking them, and now we're in June, and we are, I'll use myself, my goal is 120 million this year, and let's say I'm trending below that. At what point do you, like, you have these macro goals, right? I would call that a macro goal, like annual. Sure. I don't really have goals that are much past 12 months. And I've got visions, but not in terms of tangible numbers, because there's so much can change. And I feel like, I think you have to have micro goals as well. Like, so you have to break that down into, if I want to do 120 million, then that means I have to talk to, or I have to do 10 million a month. 10 million a month means I have to do X amount of applications, blah, 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 all the way down to, I have to talk to X number of people per day. And what does that look like? And how do I back into that? So obviously you have to have micro goals, because you can't create 120 million by doing one activity overnight. You can't get to December and be at 10 and then do 100 in December to make up for it. So you have to be doing your micro daily things. So are you somebody who, when you're coaching people, when you see successful people, are they focused more on the micro with the macro being a vision? Or do you see somebody just really looking ahead at their macro and knowing that if they focus on that, nothing will get in their way and they'll get there? Because I find myself discouraged sometimes when I'm off track on that, and then I have to like redo my goal.
Yeah, I love that you've asked that and called it out, particularly at your level. I think, for listeners to, first of all, hear that your goal is 120 million. I mean, that's significant, right? And people need to listen to that for what it is. The fact that you are interested in doing a podcast and doing 120 million, I think is very impressive. So
maybe that's why I'm off my goals.
You know what, bud? It could be.
That is more fun.
Well, and you know what? I mean, that's the way that I coach, right? I have a $100 million producer that I coach right now. And the conversation that she and I are having is all about fun, genuinely. Like, are you having fun? Here's the good news. She owns 14 rentals. She did right out 100 million. Her goal was 110 million this year. But the conversation we're having right now is, like, when's enough? And when does lifestyle become more important than production for production's sake? Because you know what? Scotsman's Guide isn't going to be hanging out at your retirement party or at your memorial.
It's so funny that you say that. I've got stories about that. Let's get to the question, and I'll talk about Scotsman's Guide in a second.
You bet. Sorry, did I leave a question?
It's all right. So micro goals versus macro,
Micro for sure. But I do think that there's a point. The thing that I was complimenting you on is people don't often talk about that. Like, wow, at what point do I retool my goal?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not because you're saying I'm doing this other fun thing, so I'm not doing the volume. Sometimes you're working your butt off, and you're just not getting there, and the goal gets further and further away. Yeah. And there's tons of sales psychology on this, that at some point that actually becomes a disincentive.
Yeah.
And you tune it out, right? So far better, I think, to trim it up, come alongside it, cut some of the fat out. You know what? We're going to hit 100 million, but we're going to nail it this year, and then double down on your activities to hit your micro goals, because that's what you can control. If you do any research, do any Googling on sales contest length of time, they will all tell you shorter periods of time are better, right?
Yeah.
So the truth of the matter is, we have an annual goal. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And even if you're thinking quarter to quarter, we're probably going to have to start thinking about it monthly. And, I encourage my clients to look at it weekly and really daily.
Yeah. So in breaking it down into what are the activities that you need to do to generate the activities, to generate the relationships that are going to generate the applications that are going to generate the clients that are going to generate the volume, that it's going to generate the income. And at the end of the day too, then like you can do all of that. And like, so to get to the Scotsman's Guide thing, I got, I think any originator who starts to get some decent sized numbers starts looking at those, and like I got so hung up probably 3, 4, 5 years ago on how high can I get on that list. Yeah. At the detriment of like I almost didn't care how much I was making. I didn't care. Like it was just about that number, and it's so much ego involved in that. I just really last couple of years I've been like, who cares? Like I would much rather have a sustainable business and working with less people who I like more, kind of the Jerry Maguire model,
Absolutely.
less clients, but more profitability and better feeling around it rather than trying to take on every single. I can tell you dozens of stories of people that I've talked to who've actually cut back greatly on the number of realtors that they work with, like really gone through and slashed it and actually do a lot more volume now and are a lot happier and a lot more stress-free.
Totally agree. Todd Duncan has been screaming that from the stage for 20 years. It's true. With one exception that I'm aware of, and I'm not even 100% sure he still does this. I don't know if you know RJ Crosby in Phoenix with First Choice, but RJ has always had this philosophy of, I'm going to go with all of the average agents because they actually appreciate me more. They will defer to me. They'll let me drive the transaction. And I diffuse my risk over, 30 to 40 agents instead of 10.
Interesting.
So I can tell you that's what RJ has done, and it's worked really well for him, but it's just a completely different philosophy.
I was talking to somebody a while back about that. Do you go after top agents or do you go after kind of like that next tier? And I can make an argument, certainly, if we're going after the next tier simply because of what the top agents are requesting in certain markets. I think I define top agent as the top agent who aligns with me the best, not necessarily the guy who's doing 300 million worth of volume in my market. Like to me, A agent, B agent, C agent is all about who's most aligned with you. And that tracks a bit. Volume is one data point in there. And it's an important data point because you could be the nicest person in the world selling one house a year. But it's really more about like a minimum amount of volume, but the ratio of volume, like signal to noise ratio, right? Of how much they're appreciating me and how much I can help them versus how much stuff that they throw at us. So it's interesting.
To that point, Andrew, something that I just find to be surprising how few people actually do this, and I probably shouldn't be surprised. I think if you go to most average loan originators and ask them who the realtors are that they work with, and then you kind of dig down into so why is that? Tell me about that relationship. More often than not, it's because there's a connection there. I would hang with that person.
Yeah, they're friends.
Steve Sims of Blue Fishing would call it the chug test, right? It's like, I play golf with them. Great. What kind of business did they do last year? He only sold like 6 houses, but God, he's a great guy, man. He's just a great guy. So these days, the data is available, right? You can get the data. And so what I always coach clients to do is start with, as you said, the empirical data. Let's figure out what the volume is. Like remove that. I used to work for a guy from Texas, and he would say, if you don't know that data, it's like bowling with a sheet in front of the pins. You know something's happening, but you can't see the score, right? So see the score, because here's what we know about realtors. They look good on the outside, but if you've ever filled out a 1003, you know, right watch, right car, but like no money.
A lot of leases.
So, right? So we got to get down to what's the volume. Then the next step is now you vet them for, is there a cultural fit here? Is this a person I would actually want to do business with? Because here's what we know. If you've got a realtor who's out of control, they're going to be out of control in your world, and they're going to be calling you at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, and it's going to wear really thin really quickly. And I'm sure 100%. You live that.
And you may not, if you have standards around, and listen, I don't apply my work-life balance on anybody. Like I think that's something that people have to figure out for themselves. Like the 28-year-old single guy who's like hustling and really trying to grow his business, like him taking a call on a Friday night is much less of an impact on his life than someone like me. So everybody has their own standards there, but you have to have, I believe, some standards around how you want that to work. And if you have somebody who's not adhering to that, and listen, I've got a realtor who he sleeps until 10, but he works really late, just his schedule, and he's super successful. And so I understand that about him, and I understand that I'm going to get the occasional 8:30 or 9 o'clock call, but he's always very efficient and is always very respective of my time and whatnot. So, but I think that if that's not something that you enjoy doing and you're not answering that phone, like you have to realize that you're not the best fit for them. So even if they want to work with you, like cutting them loose, it's kind of it's not you, it's me problem.
Right.
And so you have to really be aligned in that. And there's going to be somebody who will actually better serve them, even if they're not as experienced as you and maybe don't have the expertise and don't handle the clients in as good a way. They're going to be more responsive. So those are 6 really good things. And I don't really see any, I know you were saying that that's through 20 years of interviewing top realtors. I don't see any difference. I really see zero difference under where my intuition is that all the top loan officers are having those same 6 things. And you can completely draw those same conclusions. I mean, tracking, knowing where your leads are coming from, being confident in an interview setting and talking to people, craving efficiency. That's probably the biggest thing I would say out of all of these is just how efficient can you get to the volume numbers that you want to get to.
Well, but there is that hunger in the mortgage space. I mean, are you checking out Savage's productivity? What does he call it? Mastermind?
No, I haven't seen that. No. Dave Savage?
It's a great group, man. Yeah, it's a mortgage coach productivity group. There's 3,000 members. And what's great about it is most of the conversations about efficiencies. So there's a whole lot of conversation in there, of course, about total cost analysis and so on and so forth, because it's mortgage coach. But they really do drill down into what CRM are you using? How are you following up with your, right these days, right? It's more about follow up with TBDs than anything else. Yeah. And for a guy who's been in the business for so long, I am shocked to hear how few people have a system for annual mortgage reviews. Like, seriously? Yeah. How did we get away from that? And the answer, of course, is that the phone was ringing for the last 10 years. And it's easy to get away from.
It was important, but not urgent.
Totally.
I think that, and apologize if I'm misquoting you on this, but I believe you're the one that posted something on Facebook a while back about, can we stop calling internet leads and just call them leads?
Right. They're people.
They're just people, right? Exactly. Like pretty much every lead is coming. That's just where they go now. It's the same people that were a sign call before are now just going online. Like it's the same people. So like there's certainly a lot more to sift through. I want to shift gears just a second because I'm interested in your take on what you think the future is here over the next, let's call it 2 to 10 years, and I'll set the stage a bit for you. You have everybody thinking that Amazon's coming into the space. I don't know to what extent they do. We can talk about that. Obviously, Quicken is the biggest player in town right now. We can talk about that. There's some of these hybrid type of places where it's online / combining retail. So your loan depots and guaranteed rates of the world. Where do you see the self-sourced originator, let's say, which is a majority of my audience? Where do you see that changing? Are you more glasses half full, half empty? What is your thoughts on this sort of state of the industry here moving forward?
Yeah, great question, man. And it's only my opinion, right? So I could be way wrong on this. It's like,
well, I don't think anybody really knows, so.
Well, it's true, but you can go off on a prognostication, and if nobody holds you to it, then it's like, okay, he knocked out of his butt there really nicely.
Yeah, great.
Here's what I see. I mean, what I see and what I think are probably two different things. What I see right now is I don't know, man, I was going to use the term flight to quality. You remember we used that a few years ago, QM, right?
Yep.
But I feel like that's almost an accurate statement. There's probably a better way to say it, but what I mean is this. For example, I don't know if you know Josh Metal or not.
I do.
I coached Josh for years, and, Josh is just Superman. So I call him Metal Man. But about 6 or 8 years ago, he made the decision to focus strictly on physicians, and then he went down the path of doing that in all 50 states. And, he made a move recently to Fairway and took 3 to 350 million in volume. He's got his eyes on $1 billion, and he's not kidding. Yeah. And he's built a really powerful team. And I heard yesterday from one of my fellow coaches, Todd Bookspan, he said, all the LOs on his team right now are prospecting for an hour a day. And I thought, okay, that's awesome. I need to hear that. So I sent him a video text and just said, dude, straighten me out on this. Is that a fact? And he said, well, on an off day, it would be an hour. He said, here's how we structure our days. And this is the reason I tell you this. It's the flight to quality. And then I'll talk about what I think I see moving forward. They start, and I think they've done this for about 3 years. They start every single day in his office with a gratitude session. It's brilliant. It centers them. It gets them focused on the right things. What are you grateful for? Seldom is it money. More often than not, it's my daughter, it's my son, it's my wife, it's my husband, it's my health, it's my
the weather. I mean, it's actually little things, right?
Exactly, right.
Well, maybe not in Utah.
Good point, man. Good point.
Sorry, I'm looking outside in Newport Beach with the palm trees and slight breeze. And sorry, that's what came to mind for me.
No doubt, man. No doubt. But then they move into 4 hours of prospecting. So 8 to noon every day is what's expected of the team. And prospecting, I'm doing finger quotes in the air like we're on video. Prospecting is really primarily lead follow-up. I think in 2018 right now, Andrew, that's really what prospecting is for the most part. I think that there's a second section where you're doing your annual mortgage reviews. Who is it that just recently did a great call on this? Rick Shearer. I don't know if you've heard.
Rick was my first podcast.
Awesome. So he may have told you this story, but he does annual mortgage reviews every single day, sets up the expectation for the person in the database, and ends it with an old, if you remember, there was a Barry Habib version of this, there was a Todd Duncan of this, and there was a Dave Savage version of this. But he always asks them, are you happy with your attorney, your CPA, your financial planner?
Yeah, page 5 of the 1003, right? Yeah.
Totally. And he says 60% of the time, he's making referrals. So what's he doing? He's building referral possibility at the back end, right? So it feels like to me, the more that's happening right now, and I had another guy that I spoke to yesterday, a guy with On Q, and we were having this conversation over my blog post around what I call double down. And I was just saying, there's a lot of noise out there, and you just got to double down, right? And this guy says, so here's my philosophy. He'll do 6.7 million last month. He'll do 7 million next month in the Pacific Northwest. And he said, I get up, I brush my teeth, I go to work, I put my head down, and I make my calls. And I just thought, I love this. I just love this because, right? Here's my belief, man, and it's so overly simplistic, Andrew, but I think you get it. I think you live this. It's like I can buy into the drama, and the drama can be, my company isn't competitive right now with price.
Margin compression, blah, blah, blah.
Margin compression.
Yeah. Right. If I hear that one more time, I'm going to throw up. I swear.
Holy cow, right? Or I can control what I can control, which is put my head down and stay in touch with people and provide value and get paid. And let the rest of the people that are stirring the pot, let them spin out. Because honestly, they're going to spin out. They're going to leave the business. We can't afford to keep people that aren't doing 2 units a month on the books.
The market that was keeping a lot of these people in, and the margin compression is just a function of there's a lag time between supply and demand. That's all it is. I mean, there's still excess supply of mortgages out there for the demand. Eventually, they go away, but in the meantime, people compress margins to get there. So who cares? Like, if you have a long-term vision of this, you do the same activities no matter what it is anyway.
Every time, man. So listen to Andy, because that's what I'm telling you. That's the game.
Yeah, I mean, I see that as kind of a short-term phenomenon in our market currently. I don't know how long, but that's like 1 to 2 years. Like, I want to dig more into what do you see the role of technology doing to the mortgage originator?
Yeah, really good question, right? So I think that there's going to be a play, particularly with millennials who are enjoying the idea of, like they would with any other service, right? If I'm buying a car, if I'm buying a television, if I'm dating, if I make it easy for me technologically to get into that. Now, ours is arguably the most complicated financial transaction they're ever going to be involved in. So I do think there's going to be some recoil from that.
Yeah.
Like a friend of mine said the other day, he said, so when that person says to me, I can go over here and get that deal for, 7/8 lower. It's like, okay, so here's what you should do. Seriously. I think you should do that deal if they can close on time and if you don't have to bring more cash to closing.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's a good way to frame that, right? Because sometimes what seems too good to be true is too good to be true. Other times, honestly, it rocks and it's fantastic. And it's like, you probably should do that. So I think there's always going to be a play, in my opinion, for the Quickens, for the Loan Depots, for whoever the next player is that comes in underneath that.
Yeah.
But what I know for sure is there's an enormous market for somebody who can make the complicated simple and understandable and help me through a transaction.
Yeah.
And dude, this business isn't getting any easier anytime soon.
It's not. And that's I mentioned this to somebody before. The ironic part about the state of our industry right now and the state of where technology is I think one of the biggest things that is keeping the self-sourced originator, so we'll say like the non-online originator, really involved, and really a lot of these big companies, my company, like a lot of the companies that you talked about, really keeps their market share has been, the complexity has been introduced mainly through regulation. And it's the regulation that we all fought the last 5 or 10 years, which is ironic that it has created this barrier to entry that even Silicon Valley hasn't yet penetrated. My opinion on it is I do think that it's only a matter of time before either technology figures out the complexities in a way that is efficient for a client, or those complexities loosen up. And technology is only going in one direction. It's never moving backwards.
Right.
And I would say it's pretty hard for the complexities of the transaction to get that much more complex. So I tend to be a little bit more dystopian about it. I think that our job changes. I don't know that it necessarily goes away. I think our job changes. I was talking to Ryan Grant probably about a year ago now at this point, and his opinion is that kind of everybody in the middle gets squashed. It's going to go, yeah. So you're going to go super high quality, high service levels, concierge. Like, I'm going to get the deal done. We're never going to screw up at a higher price, or chasing the low price over the cliff. And some, we'll call it Uber mortgage wins, right? And so yeah, I think that's kind of the state of it. But in the short term, I don't think it changes much around what we do day to day. I think it's interesting to watch what happens, though.
It's a little like retail, I guess, or travel agents, right? I think you can make the argument that everybody, including me, all of my travel stuff is booked online now, right? There's no doubt. But if I wanted to book a photo safari for 2 weeks in Africa,
you're not going on Expedia.
Go to somebody that specializes in that. Absolutely.
Yeah. I would say, if you look at the travel agency, if you could have gone back to 1997 and said, this is what it's going to look like, and showed them 2018, I would say that's a pretty dystopian view of what happened with the traditional travel agent, because they definitely did get replaced by technology. I do think it's much more complicated for us. I can see potentially a few big players coming in and still needing like reps on the ground to go, let's say, sell to realtors, but instead of selling yourself as the originator, you're selling your piece of technology. Here's why you're using Uber Mortgage, because our technology is so good. So there's still going to be some play for that. It may just turn more into software sales than necessarily origination, which I think is a potential play for where we could convert to. But
no doubt.
Yeah. So I mean, the thing about like someone like Quicken Rocket Mortgage, to me, they don't sell at this point. They don't sell rate. Like, you don't see their commercials talking about rate. You see their commercials talking about being frictionless. Amazon even doesn't sell price. You can find stuff cheaper than Amazon. They sell the ability to. They sell the one-click checkout. That's really, and your credit card's loaded in there. Yep. That's really what Rocket Mortgage is. They're selling convenience and frictionless transaction. Whether they actually deliver on it is TBD probably, but that's really what they're going after, which I think is something that we actually can emulate and not necessarily have to chase rate over the cliff or chase margin compression over the cliff. We can do that frictionless piece and just make it easy for people. I think that's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, Bill, we're coming up here on about 50 minutes. I wanted to make sure we touched on your book. You have a book coming out on May 22nd. This podcast likely will be published a little bit after the book's out. So if you're listening to this, then go buy Bill's book. I want you to tell us a little bit about it. It's called White Collar Warrior. Tell us a little bit about what the book's about.
You bet. So the full title is White Collar Warrior, Lessons for Sales Professionals from America's Military Elite. And you know what happened to me? I didn't serve in the military. As it turns out, only 0.5% serves our country in uniform. And the special operations leading edge of the spear is actually 1% of that number. So it's a very, very, very small group, very elite. And I don't know, it was probably 6 years ago, I read the book Lone Survivor that went on to become a major motion picture with Mark Wahlberg. And it just really hit me, man, that this is just amazing to me, the degree of dedication and training and what is necessary, and that brotherhood, that camaraderie that you just don't see anywhere else is mind-boggling to me. And I really became interested in that world. And so I became involved in a charity called Boot Campaign, bootcampaign.org, if you'd like to go check it out. We help men and women as they return from war with traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress. And this year I have the honor of serving on their board of directors, and I'm really involved in everything that we're doing at Boot Campaign. So it's just really become a part of me. But as I started to meet these Navy SEALs and Army Rangers and Top Gun instructors, it turns out David Burke that I interviewed for the book, you really begin to see that there's just a different approach to everything that they do. And when I started to think about the Andrew Sauces of the world and the Josh Mettles of the world and the people that are doing phenomenal volume in our industry, there's parallels, man. And so the chapters are, what does it take to be the best? And what about training and discipline and fear and planning, failure and motivation and teams? All of that stuff applies on both sides. So that's really the focus of the book. And so I interviewed Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, and, as I said, a Top Gun instructor, distilled down sort of what I got from them in each of those categories, and then started to look for parallels in our business. And truly, it's uncanny. I mean, if I was going to summarize it in a nutshell, I would say, you can tell I just get fired up and animated about it when I start talking about it. But to me, it's just so clear. If you really think about it, our country drives people towards average. Average is okay. And what I've learned in the special operations arena is that's just not even close to being acceptable. Each one of these guys, and at this point it's all guys, there will be more women coming in. 2 women have now graduated Ranger training. But each one of them to a person would tell you, I pushed myself physically harder than I ever thought was possible. And I locked onto a mindset to a person. Every single one of them says to me, one way or another, the message is don't quit. So whether that was in training or on the battlefield in a deployment, there's always this sense of, you can't take me out. You can't make me quit.
Yeah.
And I see it in our business, right? It's or any sales endeavor. This book is really intended for anybody in sales, not just the mortgage industry, but that's it in a nutshell. It's like, what's the difference between excellence, the elite, and average? And that's what White Collar Warrior focuses on.
That sounds amazing. It sounds a bit like the business side. It's almost like the reverse of Jocko's book, right? He took all of his Navy SEAL lessons, applied to business, and you're sort of taking a different perspective on it and seeing how much correlation there is there. Are you familiar with David Goggins?
Yeah.
So, that guy's pretty intense.
Another non-human.
Completely. Like he said, I listened to him on Joe Rogan's podcast, and he was saying that most people think that their max is about at 30% of what they can actually do.
Yeah.
Which is unbelievable. If you think you're completely maxed out, you can actually go 3 times further than you think. And I think where this applies in a business sense is people set their goals, I think, way too low. Totally. They just are so self-limiting when it comes to that stuff. And there's actually a lot more that you can do. And it's not just about numbers. It's not about Scotsman's Guide. It's not about making $10 million a year. It's about fulfilling what you can actually do and what your capacity is for creating an amazing business, and what it can do for your life.
Right, exactly. The cool thing about that is it's up to you, and it all comes down to a decision. There's a U.S. Navy SEAL retired commander named Mark Devine who lives down near you, actually, and he said, bottom line, if you lack an underlying commitment to self-mastery and growth, even the best theory won't help you lead yourself or a team to success. In other words, it's up to you.
Yeah.
Right? It's not about theory. It's about self-mastery and growth. So it's more like, how good can we get at this? How much more could we do? Here's a crazy example. Do you know Hunter Marquardt with
yes,
RPM?
Yeah.
So Hunter told me in a sales rally, I was interviewing him years ago, and I know we got to cut this loose. I'll make this my final thought unless you have questions, because I've got a call at the bottom of the hour. But he said, I realized I was attending closings and it was just sucking me dry. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't physically be there. Do you know this story?
I think I heard him talk about it on a podcast.
He does them in his conference room. It's brilliant. He controls the closing experience, if you will, not the physical closing.
Yeah.
He invites them in. They serve a little glass of champagne. He walks in for a photo op. He says, you know what, I got to be on a call. I'm sorry. Congratulations, you guys. Goes back into his office. Genius.
Yeah.
Right?
There's
always a way to do it better.
Yeah, it turns a 2.5 hour process of driving there, coordinating, driving back into 5 minutes of the best part of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's amazing. Exactly. Well, great. Bill, hey, really, really appreciate you coming on. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Would love to have you back on the podcast again. And everybody go out and buy Bill's book. I'm sure it's amazing. I can't wait for it to come out. Again, by the time you're hearing this, it's already out on Amazon or wherever you buy books, which is Amazon, let's face it. So White Collar Warrior. Yeah, and Barnes & Noble. There you go. Great. Well, Bill, thanks again. I'll let you go and appreciate you coming on.
So my pleasure, bud. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
The information contained in this podcast presentation is for business and professional use only to assist real estate professionals and is not an advertisement to extend consumer credit as defined by Section 226.2 of Regulation Z. Arklatex Financial Services, LLC, NMLS number 22142 DBA Benchmark Mortgage makes no representations or warranties of any kind expressed or implied about the completeness, reliability, suitability, or availability with respect to the information, products, or services. All loans subject to borrower qualifying. Other restrictions may apply. Branch Manager Andrew Sauce, NMLS number 259002. Branch located at 140 Newport Center Drive, Suite 210, Newport Beach, California 92660. Contact the branch by calling 949-258-9555. Equal housing opportunity.